It is -40 degrees Fahrenheit outside. The trees are frozen solid. The ground is iron. The air burns your lungs the moment you breathe it in. Most men his age are home. Warm. Safe. Done. Not Dr. Harold Mercer. He is 72 years old. He spent 43 years as a physician. He saved lives in emergency rooms. He stitched wounds at 3 in the morning. He diagnosed what other doctors missed. And now, retired, white-bearded, standing alone in a snow-buried forest in northern Minnesota, he is holding a cup of hot coffee, watching steam curl up into the Arctic air. Behind him sits something that should not exist, a corrugated steel arch on wheels, glowing amber from the inside, radiating warmth so intense that the snow within 3 feet of the walls is melted into a perfect ring, while everything around him is frozen to death. The inside of that machine is 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 65 degrees warmer than the air trying to kill him. 65 degrees warmer than the air trying to kill him. He built it himself. One man, no contractor, no architect, no crew, just a retired doctor, a welding torch he taught himself to use at age 69, and a quiet obsession with a question that had followed him for years. What if the way we build shelters in cold climates is completely, fundamentally wrong? This is a story of how he answered that question. And what he built will change the way you think about warmth, survival, and what one determined man is capable of doing when the world tells him it is already too late. Harold did not set out to build a cabin. He set out to solve a problem. After retiring from medicine, he moved to a remote plot of land in northern Minnesota that he had owned for decades but never had time to use. He planned to build a small cabin, rest, read, live simply. He had earned it. The first winter nearly ended all of it. He rented a prefabricated frame cabin to stay in while he planned his permanent structure. It was a standard build, insulated walls, a good wood stove, double-pane windows, exactly the kind of shelter millions of people trust every winter. At -20 degrees, the cabin struggled. The stove ran constantly. The floors were cold enough to feel through 2 pairs of socks. The corners of the windows frosted on the inside. The heating cost for a single month was staggering, and Harold, who had spent a career studying the human body under stress, began to understand something deeply uncomfortable. The cabin was losing the war, not slowly, not marginally. It was hemorrhaging heat through every surface, every corner, every edge, the square walls, the flat ceiling, the right-angled joints. Every architectural choice that looked normal and sensible with a thermal failure point. The cold did not attack from one direction. It crept in from everywhere simultaneously. Harold started taking notes, not like a man planning a renovation, like a doctor diagnosing a patient. He documented where the heat was escaping. He measured temperature differentials between the floor, the walls, and the ceiling. He calculated how much energy was being consumed just to stay stationary, not comfortable, not warm, just alive. And the numbers were damning. He spent that entire winter reading engineering manuals, military construction guides, from World War II, Arctic survival architecture studies, from Scandinavian universities, materials science papers on closed cell phone. And one evening, in the middle of a blizzard that dropped 2 feet of snow overnight, he found something that stopped him completely. A photograph of a Quonset hut, not a modern one, an original, built in 1941 by the United States military for rapid deployment in any climate, any terrain, any condition. Semicircular corrugated steel. No corners, no flat surfaces, just a continuous arch from ground to ground. Soldiers had assembled them in hours. They had survived hurricanes, desert heat, Arctic winters. And Harold, reading the thermal data from wartime field reports, felt his physician's brain click into focus. The arch was not just strong. It was thermodynamically alive. Here is what most people never understand about heat and cold. Cold does not simply enter a space. It hunts for weaknesses. Corners are weaknesses. Right angles are weaknesses. Every point where 2 flat surfaces meet is a structural crease where air pressure differentials allow cold infiltration at a microscopic level. Standard cabins are full of them, dozens of corners, hundreds of linear feet of joints and edges and seams. A semicircular arch has none of that. No corners, no right angles, no flat ceiling where warm air pools and stagnates while cold air hugs the floor. The arch is continuous. The geometry forces air to move. Warm air from the stove rises, curves with the ceiling, travels the length of the structure, descends along the far wall, and returns to the stove. A perfect convective loop. No fan required. No ductwork. No electricity. Pure physics doing the work for free. Harold calculated the surface area difference between a box structure and an arch of equivalent interior volume. A standard rectangular cabin of the same living space had 40% more exterior surface area than the Quonset arch, 40% more skin exposed to the cold. 40% more surface radiating heat outward into the frozen air every second of every night. He also calculated the snow load difference. A flat or gently pitched roof accumulates snow. Snow adds weight. Weight adds structural stress. A semicircular arch sheds snow automatically. The curvature deflects wind. There is no surface for snow to grip. It slides off before it can build up. Harold sat back from his desk that night and said out loud to no one, "I am going to build one of these, and I am going to put it on wheels." The wheels were not an afterthought. They were a philosophical decision. Harold had practiced medicine long enough to understand that the most dangerous thing a man can do is become permanently fixed. Fixed in his diagnosis, fixed in his location, fixed in his thinking. The moment you stop being able to move, you become dependent. Dependent on the grid, dependent on the road, dependent on whoever controls the resources around you. A mobile structure could move to where the firewood was. It could relocate when the access road flooded in spring. It could be positioned on a south-facing slope in December to maximize solar gain, then move to a sheltered draw in January to minimize wind exposure. It was not just shelter. It was adaptive shelter. A living decision that could be reconsidered every single morning. He sourced a heavy tandem-axle steel trailer. He reinforced the frame himself, welding additional cross members at load-bearing points. He treated every inch of the steel for corrosion. He fitted off-road tires capable of handling the unplowed forest roads on his property. Then he began forming the arch. He built a custom bending jig from scrap steel. Using it, he hand-formed corrugated galvanized steel panels into curved arch sections. Each panel was overlapped and riveted with construction sealant between layers. The semicircular form rose from the trailer bed section by section. He welded custom steel end walls to close the front and rear of the structure, cutting precise openings for the door and a single double-pane window at each end. The shell alone took 11 weeks. He worked alone every day regardless of weather. At 72 years old, in temperatures that regularly dropped below zero, Harold Mercer was on his hands and knees on a frozen steel trailer bed, forming and riveting panels by hand. His neighbors thought he had lost his mind. They had not yet seen what he was building on the inside. This is where Harold's medical background became the most important tool in his kit. Every physician understands the concept of a thermal envelope. The human body maintains its core temperature through layers: skin, fat, muscle, clothing. Each layer serves a specific function. Each layer communicates with the ones around it. Strip one away and the system fails. Harold designed the insulation of his Quonset cabin the same way he would design protection for a patient going into hypothermic surgery. Layer 1 was closed-cell spray polyurethane foam applied directly to the inside of every inch of steel. Not fiberglass bats, not rigid board. Spray foam. And the reason matters enormously. Corrugated steel is one of the most thermally conductive materials on Earth. Touch the outside of a steel wall at -40, and the cold travels straight through to the inside in seconds. Fiberglass bats pressed against steel do nothing about this because they leave microscopic air gaps at every contact point. Cold finds those gaps. Cold always finds the gaps. Closed-cell spray foam eliminates the gaps entirely. It bonds chemically to the steel surface, expanding to fill every corrugation, every rivet hole, every seam. It creates an unbroken membrane. No air infiltration. No thermal bridging. Just continuous insulation at approximately R6 per inch, applied in multiple passes until Harold had achieved what he estimated to be an effective R value across a shell of 28 or better. The foam also bonded the arch structurally. The corrugated steel and the cured foam became a single composite material, significantly stiffer and stronger than either alone. He was not just insulating, he was reinforcing. Layer 2 was tongue and groove pine paneling fitted over the cured foam. Pine is warm to the eye and warm to the body. It absorbs and releases ambient heat slowly. It adds an additional insulation layer. It creates a complete air barrier over the foam surface. And it transforms the raw industrial interior of the steel shell into something that looks and feels like a home. Harold milled the tongue and groove boards himself from timber he had harvested on his own property. He fitted them by hand. Each board curved slightly to follow the arch overhead. When he finished, the interior of the Quonset glowed, amber and warm, every surface a continuous curve. No corners anywhere the eye could find. The floor received its own obsessive treatment. Harold knew from his field research that floor heat loss in mobile and trailer-based structures is catastrophically underestimated by most builders. Cold ground beneath a trailer is colder than the air. The steel trailer frame conducts that cold directly upward. Most builders insulate the walls carefully and then lay a plywood floor directly on the trailer deck with minimal insulation beneath. Harold did not do this. He sprayed closed cell foam beneath the entire subfloor deck until the underside of the trailer was fully encapsulated. He then cut and fitted rigid foam board between every floor joist. Over that went a vapor barrier. Over the vapor barrier went a structural subfloor. Over the subfloor went a finished pine plank floor with a cork underlayment for additional insulation and acoustic comfort. The result was a floor that felt warm to bare feet at negative 40 degrees outside. Not cold, not merely tolerable, warm. Harold walked on it in his socks the first night after completion and stood in the middle of the space and was very quiet for a long time. He had done it. At the center of the structure, he installed a compact cast iron with stoves sourced from a small foundry in Vermont. The chimney penetrated the arch through a custom-fabricated steel flashing collar, sealed with high-temperature silicone. A small computer fan mounted on the stovepipe moved warm air more aggressively during the coldest hours of the night. But the stove barely had to work. That was the revelation. In a standard cabin, the wood stove fights constantly. It produces heat. The heat rises to a flat ceiling and pools there, useless. Cold air sits on the floor, where the people are. The stove cycles on and off trying to maintain equilibrium in a space that is geometrically designed to fail at the task. In Harold's arch, the stove loaded once in the evening and kept the entire space at 75 degrees until morning. The curved ceiling caught the rising heat and curved it forward and down, back toward the floor, back toward the people. The convective loop ran continuously without any mechanical assistance. One modest stove, one load of firewood, all night warmth at negative 40 outside. The power system was equally deliberate. Harold did not mount solar panels on the roof. Every winter builder who mounts solar on a roof in a snow climate eventually learns the same expensive lesson. Snow covers the panels within hours, and they produce nothing for weeks. Harold mounted his panels on a ground-based adjustable angle frame set away from the structure. He could clear them by hand in 2 minutes. He could tilt them to the optimal winter sun angle in 30 seconds. 240 watts of panels fed a lithium iron phosphate battery bank that powered his LED lighting, his phone charging, a small fan, and a battery-heated water line. His water tank lived inside the thermal envelope, fully insulated, never exposed to outside temperatures. At negative 40, pipes freeze. Tanks inside warm buildings do not. Harold had seen too many off-grid builds fail their first winter because the builder forgot that water, like everything else, obeys the laws of thermodynamics. The kitchen was a study in compact efficiency. Custom pine cabinetry, a propane 2-burner cooktop, a small sink drained to a gray water tank beneath the trailer, insulated and heat-taped, shelves fitted to the curve of the arch walls, every inch of storage considered and earned. Harold moved in on a Tuesday in November. The forecast that week was for temperatures to drop to negative 38 by Thursday. He was not concerned. Thursday night, he woke at 2 in the morning not because he was cold. He woke Because he was curious. He dressed, stepped outside, and stood in the darkness. The thermometer on the exterior read -41. The sky was clear and full of stars and utterly silent. His breath was a cloud that vanished instantly in the dry, cold air. He stepped back inside. The indoor thermometer read 74 degrees. 115 degrees of separation between outside and inside, achieved with a single wood stove burning at low output, in a structure a 72-year-old man had built alone from scratch on a frozen trailer in a northern forest. He stood in the middle of his pine-lined arch and understood something he had spent 43 years in medicine approaching, but never quite reaching. This is what it feels like to have solved the problem completely. Harold spent the following spring writing up his construction methods in exhaustive detail, not to sell them, not to start a business. He published everything online for free, every material specification, every insulation thickness, every phase of the build, every mistake and how he corrected it. Within 8 months, builders from Canada, Alaska, Norway, Finland, and Montana had contacted him. Some had already started their own builds based on his documentation. A retired schoolteacher in Manitoba built one for $11,000 that he described as the warmest structure he had ever occupied in 60 years of Canadian winters. Harold does not consider himself an engineer. He considers himself a diagnostician. He spent his career looking at systems that were failing and asking what was actually wrong, not what looked wrong, not what the standard protocol said was wrong, what was actually physically undeniably wrong. The standard cold weather cabin is a failing system. It is designed by convention, not by physics. It uses shapes inherited from warm climate construction traditions that have no business being deployed in environments where the temperature routinely kills the unprepared. The flat ceiling, the square floor plan, the right angle corners, all of them optimized for a world where heat is cheap and the cold is mild. Harold built something different. He went back to first principles. He asked what shape retains heat, what material eliminates infiltration, what geometry creates natural airflow, what mobility enables adaptation. And then he built the answers. He is 72 years old. He built it alone. He did it in a forest, in winter, with his own hands. And on the coldest night of the year, when the temperature outside was enough to kill a man in minutes, he was inside, warm, reading, a cup of tea going cold on the table beside him because he kept forgetting to drink it, because the cabin did not need him to manage it. It simply worked. That is the difference between a shelter and a solution. A shelter requires constant intervention. A solution takes care of itself. Harold spent 43 years building solutions for broken human bodies. He spent 3 years building one for a broken approach to cold weather living. The arch holds, the foam seals, the pine breathes, the stove hums, the snow falls outside and slides off the curved steel without accumulating. The temperature inside stays warm with almost no effort, 65 degrees warmer than everything around it. One man, one set of hands. One extraordinary mind that refused to accept a conventional answer because a conventional answer was clearly, measurably, demonstrably wrong. His design has now been replicated across 4 countries. Men in their 50s, 60s, and 70s have written him to say it was the first time they slept through a full winter night without waking to feed a dying stove. A wilderness guide in northern Alberta told him it was the most significant cold weather shelter development he had encountered in 30 years working in the bush. A structural engineer in Finland reviewed the geometry and said he could not improve on it. Harold read every message. He replied to everyone. And then he went back outside to check the firewood stack. That is who he is. Not a celebrity. Not a guru. A doctor who retired, got cold, got angry about it, and then got to work. The same man who got to work at 3 a.m. when a patient was failing. The same man who never accepted a diagnosis he had not personally verified. The same man who understood deep in his bones that the most important question a thinking person can ask is not how do I live with this problem, but why does this problem still exist? It still exists because people stop asking. Harold never stopped. And somewhere right now, in the deep cold of a northern winter, the amber glow of his pine-lined arch is pushing back the darkness. The snow is falling. The stove is burning low and steady. The arch is holding. 65 degrees warmer than the world outside. One man built that, at 72, alone, in a frozen forest, with his own hands. If that does not stop you in your tracks, if that does not make you question every excuse you have ever made about why the thing you know needs building is still not built, then nothing will. Harold already answered the question. The warmth is real. The arch is real. The proof is glowing amber in the dark right now, with snow falling gently against its steel sides and sliding silently, effortlessly, to the ground.